Well, I just wanted to welcome you to macroeconomics. Um, and we are going to start by giving you some foundation, some definitions, some basic foundation on how economists think. We do think a little differently than others. We see things in a slightly different way. And so by the end of this course, I'm hoping to show you how an economist thinks so that you can understand how we do what we do and how you can use what we do to make your life better. All right, let's get started. And I think the first place we need to start is some basic definitions. First of all, economics. What is it? Everything that economists do comes back to this idea of studying how we allocate our scarce resources. We, no matter what our goal is, whether we're looking at the macroeconomy, the microeconomy, whether we're looking at a specific part, a specific problem, everything that economists done comes back to this definition of economics, which is the science that studies the allocation of scarce resources. Now, given that you have been doing economics since you first got any kind of money, think about the first time you got money for your birthday or something, and you stood there and you held that $10 bill, the $5 bill, whatever, in your hands, and you said, okay, how many pieces of candy, how many video games, how many whatever can I get with this bill? That's economics. The resource that was scarce in that case was money, and you were trying to figure out the best way to use your money. That's what economics is about. Now, when we talk about scarce resources, we categorize resources into one of three categories: land, labor, and capital. Now, the letters that are here next to them represent the standard economic abbreviation for those things. So let's go back and look at them. Land, well, that's probably a misnomer. Land is considered any naturally occurring resource, hence why the N here for natural resources. Labor is you and I, people. It also includes all of the skills that we bring to the labor force. And finally, capital. Now, I have to warn you, for those of you who've taken accounting, many times the economic definition of something may be different than the accounting definition. Capital is the first example of an instance in which there are different definitions. For an economist, for this class, when we talk about capital, we are talking about manufactured goods that get used to make something else. Okay? If it's not land, if it's not labor, it's capital. Now be careful. Don't just say an asset that you have, because land is considered an asset and it is not capital. So be careful, especially of the definition that's in the textbook. It says physical and financial assets. I've checked with my accounting friends. Land is considered a physical asset. So be careful, because land is not capital. All right, let's get on. If economics is the big topic, there are two subcategories that go under it: macroeconomics and microeconomics. We're here to study macroeconomics. Macro is the big picture. Macroeconomics studies the economy as a whole, how all of the parts of the economy fit together. Think about a jigsaw puzzle that's completed. All of the parts are together. You're looking at the big finished picture. The difference is, or the opposite of that, would be microeconomics. Think about looking through a microscope. You're looking at little tiny things. So, microeconomics looks at the economy of the individual. How do you, as a single consumer, purchase bottled water for the week? Or how do you, as an individual producer, decide how much of a good to produce? All right. So, micro, which many of you are going to have to take next semester, is the study of the individual. Now, economics has a, I don't want to say a problem, but we walk a fine line between looking at how things should work and looking at how they actually work. All right? Our theories look at how things should work, and that's normative economics. Positive economics is looking at how things are actually working. And they may not be the same. We're going to come back to this as we get further into the semester. For the majority of the semester, we're going to be looking at what are considered traditional economists. We will take in a week or so a look at Marxist economics, but let's leave that aside for the moment. When we look at traditional economics, traditional economists make certain assumptions. Remember, the economy is very big, it's very broad, and so we need to make assumptions to simplify what we're looking at. Traditional economists, and let me just take a step back, these assumptions help us define our paradigm. Paradigm simply means a worldview, how you see the world. Sometimes when I think of the word paradigm, I think of putting on a pair of glasses. It shapes, it distorts how you see the world. All right. If those of us who wear glasses know we have a certain prescription that we need. And if we wear the correct prescription, we see the world clearer. If we were to put on someone else's glasses, we may not see things in the same way. Doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad, but it's just a different way. So in order to understand economics, you have to understand a paradigm. And the traditional paradigm is based on three very important assumptions. The first assumption is about human nature. What are we like as individuals? Well, we assume people are rational. And that means we know what's in our best interest and we act that way. We also assume that people want to maximize their utility. Now, here again, we have a word that has a very common definition that you and I are used to, but I'm not using the word in that way. Utility in economics means pleasure or satisfaction. So we assume that everyone wants to maximize the amount of pleasure that they get. I think it's a good assumption. Now, the second major assumption that underlines the traditional paradigm is the good life. And there are two things that go into that assumption. The first is that human wants are insatiable. Insatiable simply means we never get enough. All right, so we assume that you and I always want more. Now, it's not that we're greedy. It's that the stuff we get gives us pleasure. If it didn't give us pleasure, we wouldn't have it. So if we're out to maximize our utility, as we mentioned before, we need to get more stuff. So your good life is one in which you have a lot of stuff because it helps you maximize your utility. But not only do you want to maximize your utility, you also want to minimize your disutility. If utility means pleasure or satisfaction, disutility means pain or displeasure. One of the local lotteries a few years ago had a perfect tagline: all you need is $1 and a dream. So $1 is, what you had to work for. You just need, just a little bit of work, just a little bit of money. And you can win the lottery and you can maximize your pleasure. You can fulfill all of your dreams. Well, I don't know if that's true, but that's what we assume, that when you will have a good life if you're able to maximize the pleasure you get for the least amount of pain. The good society is one in which, this is our final paradigm assumption, in which we allocate our resources so that everyone has the good life. Everyone in society maximizes their utility and minimizes their disutility. All right? So this is the framework around which, or upon which, all economic theory, traditional economic theory, is based. Now, we certainly understand that some economists don't see the world this way, some non-traditional economists. So we'll come back to them in a week or so. Now, if you look at traditional economists and how they see the world, as I said, these assumptions here that are on the screen are the assumptions upon which we build everything. There are 3 questions that all societies must answer as far as economists are concerned. The first question is what to produce. What are we going to make? The second question is how are we going to make it? Remember, there's never just one way to do that. And finally, the third question, which I personally think is the most important, is who gets the product? Think about when products are not distributed fairly, what could happen? It's called revolution. All right. Now, there are different ways these questions can be answered. The first way we look at is that of the traditional societies. These are the developing countries in the world today. And they are characterized by limited resources. So guess what? If you have very, very limited resources, then you have to answer all of these questions by tradition. You do it the way you've always done it. But there are other ways of answering the question. Planned economies, these are what we can call Marxist or socialist economies. The government, for them, answers all of these questions. They feel that it's better to have some centralized authority answering all of the questions. But for us in the West, we're interested in the market society and how the market society answers these questions. It's supply and demand. It's the cost and availability of inputs. It's who can afford it. So what we're going to be doing is try to look at these questions, see how the market society answers it. And when we get to Marx, we'll look back at the planned society and how Marx answers these questions.